The Sunday night game probably is the best of the bunch. So we're going to start with that one.
Yeah.
And that is the Philadelphia Eagles going to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Cowboys favored by 3 in the hook. The total is 53. That's 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And of course, we have our Action Network luck rankings. Be sure to check out the full luck ranking list on actionnetwork.com or in the app. Essentially, can kind of factors out all the luck and looks at, which teams have been riding too high. And the Eagles were the luckiest team. And no, the Steelers were the luckiest team.
Yep.
And lo and behold, they get blown out or they lose by 2 scores to Arizona at home. And Philadelphia gets blown out at home. So the 2 luckiest teams, the luck rankings definitely came through, pointed us in the right direction last week. This week, Philadelphia remains, even after that blowout. I guess it's not like San Francisco's just good, not lucky. So
Yeah.
Philadelphia remains the luckiest team. And this is, for all the Eagle fans out there, this is no slander. Philadelphia has been great. They're 10-2, and that you got to stack wins, try to get that home field. That's the name of the game. So that's what Philly's doing. But there have been some spots where games could have easily gone the other way. That Buffalo overtime game comes to mind. Kansas City, if they catch one of those deep balls late in the game. So there's obviously, Dallas getting down, driving downfield and still losing by 5 after all the the weirdness with Dak stepping out right before the 2-point conversion. So Philadelphia could be a little. The win-loss record may not be as good in an alternate universe if you play those games, over and over again. I don't think you get the same result every time. That's what the luck ranker is trying to say.
Yep.
Philly's number 1, and Dallas is middle of the pack. So that's 15 a differential of 15 and a 27% gap. That's the second highest of the week, in favor of Dallas. And then the total, Sean, as we were talking about off air, is minus 9.8, which essentially means these teams have combined to score nearly 10 points over expectation. But as you were telling me, and you can, I'll let you touch on any thoughts on Philadelphia and just how lucky they've been in this matchup in a second. But I do want to get your thoughts on the total, because this is the lowest of the entire slate, and one of the lowest I think we've seen all year, minus 9.8. But you're saying like this late in the years, that actually is like a reverse signal. Like, but it's kind of it kind of means that you want to tend to look toward the over in this spot. So talk about that.
Yeah. So just looking backwards, in week 10 or later, if a game has a luck total lower than negative 7.5, which this game does, games were, I should say, past tense, 20-12, so 63% to the over, and not the under. So last week that was the Dolphins Commanders. It had a luck total of minus 11. So Nick and I were pointing out that it's actually a reverse signal, potentially, in favoring the over. And sure enough, I kind of looked into it. I love the scoring potential of the first half in this game, so that's what I went with on Convince Me. It was 24.5. So there's something about it where, it's probably just overlooking how explosive an offense like the Dolphins are. And what I saw, it's typically even more so in the first half. They play at a much faster pace. So there's just a lot of things going into this. But, maybe so in this game, Dallas is accounting for minus 6.8 of that. Maybe it's just kind of over accounting how explosive their offense is. I think, if anything, maybe, all these pick sixes that Deron Bland has had will be contributing to that somewhat. You can't really lean on pick sixes. But for whatever reason, it's been sort of a reverse signal for the over. So just something to, think of when it comes to this massive lock under of almost minus 10 here.
Yeah, I think it does make some kind of sense, because, we are obviously trying to factor out the luck, but now you get this, you get to week 10 and a lot of these stats start to become sticky. Like, you're not really using as much regression once you get to week 10 for some of these numbers. And you're not going to expect Dallas to have a pick 6 or 2 every week. Dallas is leading the league in defensive touchdowns, and Dallas is number 4 in the league in explosive play rate at 12.8%. You counting an explosive play as a 12-yard rush and a 16-yard pass. So, Dallas just kind of has that magic combination that, at this point in the season, not all of that is true, like their true rates, but it's a lot more true than it would be, like in week 2 or 3 when you could say, you know what, they're just getting like we know Dallas just has, a defense that's going to take advantage of an opportunistic defense and explosive offense. Yeah. And they're starting to pass a lot more early in games since their bye. Like they're really kind of going, and we saw that kind of take place on Thursday Night Football, where it was just an offensive onslaught. Is any thoughts on just the games, how the game script may play out? We know Philadelphia is still the luckiest team, and last week there was kind of a similar spot, right? Philadelphia underdog by field goal, around a field goal, and they get blown out. You think they're in danger of that happening again now, going on the road against this well rested Dallas team on the long rest?
Yeah, probably, just because the Eagles' schedule has been brutal lately. They played the Cowboys, then they had their bye, and then it was the Chiefs, Bills, Niners, and now it's the Cowboys. It's just hard to get up for that many big games in a row, so they could have another letdown spot here. And yeah, obviously the Eagles have been lucky. They have been lucky, but you could also make the argument this is one of the best teams in the league, and they just haven't been playing up to their capabilities. So they could just be better going forward and kind of overcome some, misfortune coming their way. But yeah, I think in this spot, it makes sense. Again, seeing Dallas minus 3.5 seems like a lot, but just given how good Dallas has been and how, sort of lucky the Eagles have been, I think it makes sense. Do you have any take on like the spread or anything for this game yet?
It's not one I'll probably bet because I hate, laying 3 and the hook, but yeah. I think Dallas is the right side again, because I do think Philadelphia is not, they got to pay that back at some point. They, more power to them. They got to 10 wins first, but this team is definitely getting lucky over these past few years. We've seen it. The luck rankings back it up, and this defense we're at the point of the season where we can't just expect, Slay and Bradbury and all these guys to turn it on. And they did get a lot of brain drain with the coaches and the coordinators leaving and things like that. So yeah, at this point, I think this is what Philly is. But the good thing for DFS purposes, I think, is despite, what could be a blowout game script going Dallas's way. And I guess it could go either way, but, Dallas has been so pass heavy early in games and on early downs now, especially since the bye, that you can still feel confident rostering, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, the rest of their pass catchers, because Dallas is throwing to get a lead. It's not like, okay, now we got to just fade Dak and, go with Tony Pollard. And the Eagles' run defense has been stout. So with that being said, who do you like for the captain spot?
I'm going with Dak here. He's playing at a very high level, and you mentioned just they're throwing the ball at a much higher rate since the bye. So he probably would have even bigger passing lines if it weren't for Dallas, just playing in so many blowouts. So in what should be, a close game against a pass funnel Eagles defense, this might be the closest thing we see for like a ceiling game for Dak, at least potentially.
Since last week. Last week or the end of the week before, and the week before that.
Yeah, exactly. But those were blowouts. Like imagine if foot on the gas for all 60 minutes, that type of upside. Plus, big game, he might be more willing to tap into his rushing upside. Scramble a little bit more. And I just like using the captain slot. There's a handful of stacking options. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, but there's a lot of great pass catchers to choose from. So I like using Dak in the captain slot here.
Yeah, well, I think the reason I like Dak in the captain spot is because we know Philadelphia is strong on run defense. They're 8th in DVOA, so they've actually dropped a few spots. They were top 2 or 3 for most of the year, but it's hard to get that traditional run game going. We've seen Dallas struggle, running Tony Pollard straight up the gut, right? So that means you might have to go the non-traditional route, which involves, maybe a read option or some, quarterback draw, something using Dak's legs. If he gets a touchdown on the ground, now with the way he's been throwing the ball, you add a rushing touchdown to, his 300 plus yards and multiple scores through the air. And there's a very good chance Dak could outscore, a guy like CeeDee Lamb, even if Lamb has a big game, if Dak can get that rushing score. So in a game like this, it's less likely that, a Tony Pollard or Rico Dowdle get that rushing score because the Eagles have been so stout. So I think that's the best argument for Dak in that captain spot, is the strong Philly run defense. I like CeeDee Lamb. I mean, I love Dak as well, but CeeDee Lamb, if you're going, if you're looking for the high, and I think any Dallas pass catcher, any pass catcher is always in playing the captain spot, but CeeDee Lamb and Dak, I think, are neck and neck odds in terms of who's going to be the highest scoring player in the game. Because Dallas is favored, I think, the ceilings are a little bit higher than a guy like Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, just because of the way Dallas has been playing and because they have a higher implied point and projected point total, really. And in the first game, we know CeeDee, season high, 191 yards against Dallas on 11 catches. He's had 116 or more yards in half of his games. That is one hell of a median. That means you're getting that 3-point on average. Like, your median outcome is getting the 3-point bonus for CeeDee Lamb on draft.
Crazy.
So yeah, and in addition to, he's had 11 or more catches in 5 of his 12 games. So you're pretty much almost at a median for getting, at least 10 points with Dak, in a full PPR. With CeeDee Lamb in a full PPR. The consistency, the ceiling floor combination has just been absurd. So, I don't think Lamb is the only play. Mentioned Dak, obviously Hurts, all the, Devontae. I think, all the guys we're about to mention for, kind of mid-range as well. But CeeDee Lamb, his median has been 6.5 catches. His median has been, that 100-yard game, it happens 116-yard game happens half the time. He scored in half of his games as well. So it's really hard to go wrong with CeeDee in a captain spot. Now, the way you would go wrong is if, like we said, Dak gets a rushing touchdown, and combined with maybe like a Brandon Cooks or a Ferguson getting maybe multiple scores. But CeeDee Lamb, I think, is still if he's not the most likely player to be the highest scorer, he's definitely, I think, in that top 2. What about for value?
I'm going with Jake Ferguson here. He's just playing at a high level right now. Earlier in the season, he was benefiting from, elite playing time, but he had some issues with drops, was still coming into his own, but he's starting to play much better now and still has the elite playing time. And this is a great spot usually for tight ends. The Eagles still rank dead last in DVOA against tight ends. So I think he's another option. Again, like if you want to use in the captain slot, I can get behind that as well. One or two touch. Huh? Yeah.
I think you have to if you're making multiple lineups. Like I don't.
Yeah. For sure.
Dak is playing at such a high level that all of these guys are multi-touchdown threats in this spot.
Exactly. So yeah, if he gets 1 or 2 touchdowns, would be a great captain play here. So yeah, just in terms of value, mid-range guys, love Jake Ferguson here.
I'm gonna go with Brandon Cooks, and I think I alluded to this in one of our other pods earlier this week, but the star players, they're gonna be consistent, right? And Brandon Cooks, he's a great player. Probably you could call him a star at one point. Now he's more of a role player for the Cowboys, but he is kind of coming into his own here. And I look back at his game against the Eagles, and it was essentially his worst game of the year, really. He only had 1 catch for 7 yards, no touchdowns, no anything. So I like guys like this, role players who had a bad game in the first meeting. A lot of times they tend to bounce back because you're gonna obviously watch the tape and kind of try to shut down some of the role players that did beat you in the first game. And obviously Ferguson and and CeeDee Lamb and those guys were guys that stepped up. So, there's a good chance that Brandon Cooks can get right here, because there's nothing underlying that would say this is a tough matchup for him. Philadelphia is actually one of the man heavier defenses in the league. They're top 8 in man coverage rate, and Brandon Cooks 2 yards per route against man, 1.3 versus zone, according to Pro Football Focus. He's also second on the team in yards against man coverage, and second on the team in touchdowns with 3 against man coverage. So I do think Brandon Cooks can win here and use his speed and his quickness to get open. And this Eagle defense has been beatable. So I think people may look at that, one catch, 7 yards, and say, all right, like I'm gonna go super heavy on like Tolbert and Ferguson and Lamb only, but I wouldn't. I know Cooks has been hot lately, but I do think when you have that like first matchup that was so bad, that still does influence people. So I think that he might get a little bit lower rostership than he really deserves here. So love Cooks in this for a little while, and I would absolutely play him in the captain spot. His ceiling this year, we've only really seen it once, but he had a 9-catch, 173-yard game with a touchdown against the New York Giants about 3-4 games ago. So about a month ago. So he's definitely capable. Love him to flip the script from the first matchup. Who do you like for dart throws?
I'm gonna go to Quez Watkins here. He returned last week, had a surprising route participation rate of 70%. Julio Jones didn't play at all in the second half. I'm guessing it's injury related. I haven't heard anything, but that would make a ton of sense. And so his status will dictate Watkins' final projection for me. But just Watkins is always in play on these showdown sites because he tends to have a few big plays a year. And this is a game where the Eagles will probably have a trailing pass-heavy game script where, Hurts will probably take a few deep shots, maybe try to pull a fast one against the Cowboys. So I think, Watkins really hasn't done much this year. I think he's missed a handful of games now before last week. So he could be a little bit more under the radar than he even usually is. So I like going with Quez Watkins here.
Yeah, I'm not sure it actually was an injury. I think Quez Watkins was initially meant to be the Eagles' number 3 receiver. They only signed Julio Jones because Watkins got hurt. So, I mean, Julio Jones, we know where he is at this stage of his career. He's not really giving you much. He can still throw some run blocks, but separation wise, not really giving you much. And you have better guys to throw contested catches to on it. You got Brown and Smith. So his role is kind of, I mean, they went super pass heavy in the second half, right? Against the Niners because they were down. So I think that's really what it is. I think Watkins is just kind of returned to that number 3 role, and Julio will be a situational player at best. And I wouldn't be surprised even if, you could even see Julio healthy scratched at some point because he's not like he's playing special teams. So yeah, I think Watkins is just kind of returning to the role initially meant for him, because I think Zacchaeus, I guess, he's kind of he's like their number 4 guy, but not their number 3. So yeah, I think that's really what it was. So I like the Watkins call. I'm gonna go with Jalen Tolbert here. He did put up numbers again. Well, not numbers, but he got a score and 49 yards against the Eagles in the first meeting. So it's not kind of betting on the reversal the way I like to, but this is another guy who does well against man coverage. And again, Philly plays man at a top 8 rate. Tolbert, a team high 45% of his targets come versus man coverage, according to PFF. And he has 1.3 yards per route against man and under 1 versus zone. So the underlying metrics are good. The matchup is good for him. And he's eating into Michael Gallup's playing time. It's about a 50-50 split these days. Gallup maybe will get like a couple more routes per game than Tolbert. And one other guy I'll mention is, super contrarian, not super contrarian, but somewhat contrarian is Rico Dowdle, because again, Philly, we know they're a pass funnel, but if Dallas can put up a big number early in a game and, get a lead, at some point they are going to go to Dowdle in the second half or in the fourth quarter. And, if Philly's down, they might take out some of their horses. That defense has been playing a lot of plays over these last few weeks. And I think you could see Dowdle perhaps run against, maybe not their full strength run defense. So I know Pollard's been kind of back in firm command of that lead role. Dowdle was kind of cutting into it a little bit there in midseason, but I do think, kind of a post hype buy low on Rico Dowdle, who I think is always a good bet to get a garbage time touchdown, but they work him in early in the game sometimes as well, especially in the red zone. So like Dowdle as well, but Tolbert and Dowdle for me.
Yep.